But the fact that Harry was here for 2 days, for me, tips this over the edge into being a situation where they really should have been able to see each other. I understand that Charles may have some unresolved anger towards his son. Also, he might have a lot of stress and anxiety around the idea of seeing Harry. After all, you know, while the Queen was dying, Queen Elizabeth II was dying, Charles called Harry to tell Harry, don't bring Meghan to Balmoral. Harry blew up at him and said, you know, how dare you talk about my wife that way? That must have been a very difficult experience for Charles while his mother was dying. Needless to say, I would have loved to see Charles and Harry meet. I think it would have been great for their relationship, and you've got to remember family is family, and that will always be the case. Charles is a man who is still, he's got cancer, he's still receiving treatment for cancer, all the signs look good, but, you know, it would be hugely regrettable if they didn't get another chance to see each other. I'm sure that's not going to happen. You really would hope, though, I think, that family ties would bring the two of them together. And I would have loved to see it. Honestly, I would have loved to see Charles show up to, I think we'll probably talk more about it a little bit later, but show up for Harry's Invictus service at St. Paul's Cathedral. I would have loved to see Charles there in the audience supporting his son, because it's a fantastic project at the end of the day. Whatever people might think of Harry, the Invictus Games is a fantastic project that supports veterans who really need help.
Well, Charles was there at the first event, you know, 10 years ago. We marked. We'll talk about it later about the St Paul's Cathedral ceremony. You know, Charles was there, William was there, Camilla was there, the original one. The interesting thing I think about the lack of meeting is that the Duke of Sussex would have had to announce, or would have to have told the authorities in the UK that we understand 28 days before he arrives in the UK. That's the system. If he wants security, he has to let them know.
He wants police protection.
Yeah, so they would have known. And then they packed his diary. But also, what do you think about the fact that it was Harry's team that said the king was too busy?
This was a very delicately worded statement, and Harry isn't always delicate. Sometimes he's a bit of a bull in a china shop, but this was actually probably perfectly worded. It said just enough so that we all knew that it was Charles who had prevented the meeting, or at least the palace side that had prevented the meeting. And that Harry had wanted to meet his father, but it also did keep the tone warm and positive. So he said basically due to his schedule, but also got in there, and other priorities. So, you know, clearly Charles didn't have a very packed public schedule on the Tuesday. He did on the Wednesday, but he didn't on the Tuesday. So that was the opportunity to meet. But Charles did, in Harry's view, clearly have some other priorities. But Harry didn't put the boot in, you know, he didn't put venom in the statements. He just made sure that people knew that he had wanted the meeting, and that it was the palace side who had stopped it from happening.
The palace side, or do you think it was the king himself? I mean, because I remember Harry, we both read Spare and we've both seen all the documentaries he's done. He's not pulled punches about the people that were around the late Queen, or, you know, he had nicknames for certain private secretaries, and he was less than complimentary about people in the royal household. Do you think it was the royal household that kept them apart, or is it the king's choice that he didn't want to see his son?
I think ultimately, if the king had wanted to see Harry, the king would have seen Harry. I mean, I'm sure that Harry probably had some time dealing with the staff who we know that he hates, you know, and that was probably a difficult and frustrating experience for him that he didn't enjoy. But I think if the king had wanted to meet Harry, the king would have met Harry.
Yeah.
And, you know, honestly, it's sad. Like, I completely understand that there's a lot of anger towards Harry, and I understand why. And not just within the royal family, but also publicly. You know, he's not a hugely popular man in Britain anymore. But I think one thing that the royals, that Charles and William should take really seriously is the framing for this visit was the military and veterans. Harry was here to celebrate a project that was launched as a royal project. It was launched while he was a working royal family member. As you've said, Charles and William, they all showed out to support it back in 2014. It's a fantastic project. You've got the government were represented. Johnny Mercer turned out to support Harry. In fact, on the Tuesday, he was at a conference with Harry. So if the government, you know, Conservative government, they're going to be pro-monarchy voters, you know, and probably a lot of Conservative voters don't like Harry very much. But if Johnny Mercer can see, as Veterans Minister, that the project shines brighter than people's feelings about Harry, then the royals should be able to see that too.
Well, let's talk about that Invictus ceremony a little bit. I was there. I was very lucky enough to. I was quite high up in the seats. I had to bring binoculars to see what was going on.
Opera glasses. Did you have the opera glasses?
No, I didn't. I had binoculars because you're quite along with the press, are quite a long way away from the actual ceremony. And it was clear that no members of the royal family would turn up, as we were talking about earlier. But there were a lot of people there. We had Marco, with Mark Dyer, which are an old friend of
Major
Harry's.
Figure in Harry's life. Yeah,
Major figure in Harry's life. I think Jamie Lava Pinkerton, his former mentor, was also there, and he was surrounded by people who like him. One of the most provocative, possibly, that's my word, provocative, guest would have been Earl Spencer, which is Princess Diana's brother.
Yeah.
Now, he famously, at Diana's funeral, with a very strongly worded speech, an address that got a round of applause from people outside Westminster Abbey, talked about blood family and blood relatives and looking after William and Harry. He doesn't get on with King Charles, but he was there with Diana's sister and some cousins to support Harry. What do you make of that? Is it in a kind of PR opportunity, but also to show family relations? What do you make of that show of support from Diana's family?
Yeah, it reignites the framing that existed in the 1990s, which is basically, so you mentioned Charles Spencer's speech at Diana's funeral. He said, we, Diana's blood family, will raise these two boys up so that they are not caged by duty, but can be free to become the well-rounded people you wanted them to be. It was an incredibly powerful moment, but it was also, all the royals were sat there, including the Queen, listening to him say this, and it was a very explicit attack on them. Obviously there's some bad blood in the history between the two Charleses, but also, the allegation against the monarchy back in those days after Princess Diana died was emotional indifference. There was also this whole thing about whether they were going to come down from Balmoral, whether they were going to see floral tributes. It was all like, the headline in The Sun, I think, was, "Where is our Queen? Where is her flag?" What Harry's done here, what Harry's been able to do is, the Spencers turned out to show him love and warmth and to show him respect for this project at his big moment. It's a big thing to have your project recognised at St Paul's Cathedral with a service of thanksgiving with all these people in attendance, Damian Lewis reading a poem, brilliant actor. And the Spencers were there and Charles wasn't and William wasn't. And it's back to that framing of the royals are emotionally indifferent and the warmth comes from Diana's side of the family. This is the strange thing about Harry, is that he has done some things that have made people very angry with him, throwing hand grenades at his family, criticising people, spilling royal secrets in this book. But the better he behaves, the more the criticism shifts off him and it risks passing on to the royals. So when he actually behaves himself and does things the way he's supposed to do them, doesn't criticise people and doesn't throw hand grenades, certain underlying tensions bubble to the surface, like often actually related to his military career and his war record. It was the same thing with whether he was going to wear his military uniform to support Queen Elizabeth II in the run-up to her funeral. And the monarchy started taking some serious criticism over the fact that he wasn't going to be allowed to. And right back in those days, he did it right. He wasn't criticising anybody. He played the game. He turned up with William and Kate to do the job in Windsor. And when he behaves himself, that is when the monarchy is actually at its most vulnerable. And that really is what has happened here. Is I think that Charles and William maybe did not realise that the greatest threat to them is actually Harry behaving himself.